Let's analyze the situation, investigate the motivation, and utilize the inspiration and discover the soul of us. The soul of us.
Good evening, good evening, good evening on this Good Friday. Coming to you live on Facebook. You guys, this is the Soul of Us podcast. Just welcome. Come on in. Come on in. We appreciate you. Today's guest, we have a guest host again. He was on our other episode, one of our previous episodes. I think it was episode 3, Perception. My pop, one of the main reasons I am the way that I am. Great person to talk about this, the impact of police brutality. But I'll let him go ahead and introduce himself again. Go ahead, Pop.
My name is Thomas Prey, and like I said before, I'm a black man living in America, hoping to have some positive impact as we try to gain emotional wellness.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Appreciate you, Pop. Your positive support for me. You're already doing your job because they say you only got to reach one, and your job is So I might be that one, right?
Yeah, you might be that one.
Right. So I appreciate you. So I think we're gonna have a dynamic conversation today. It's police brutality, the impact of police brutality, the history, the correlation between then and now. You feel me? The impact of trauma, and how it shapes our reality. So, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're not going to delay any further. I'm your host, your favorite mental health coach, Hanif Akinyemi, and this is episode 10. Episode 10 of the Soul of Us podcast, the impact of police brutality, um, you know, and everything that we talk about is geared towards emotional wellness, right? So just to recap, last episode we talked about trauma, the hurt and the healing, part 2, and we talked about the different responses to trauma. So we outlined how trauma shapes our reality, how trauma shapes our behavior, and how we normalize those behaviors. We don't even sometimes know that we're doing it. It's just, an unwanted pattern of behavior that we have that shapes our reality. And it's based on past experiences or perceived thoughts about things. So last episode was dynamic. So this episode is really going to follow up on it because now this is another form of trauma. And we're going to talk about how, police brutality and how it shapes our reality. So let's get started. We're going to start with the history, right? And who other than my pop, the resident historian to get us started. Go ahead, Pop.
Well, if you're going to look at the impact that police brutality has had on our people, you definitely have to look back into the past and realize that initially there were no police forces in America. There were organizations that were devised and created strictly for the purpose of controlling the slave population. And those entities persisted until the time of emancipation, at which point they were transferred over to a new type of force, which was implemented to enforce the Black Code.
Yes, the Black Codes.
Black Codes allowed them to institute laws that would make it virtually impossible for a free black man to actually have freedom. They required contracts, yearly contracts of employment, and failure to have such a contract would result in incarceration and forced labor. In other words, slavery point 2.0.
Right.
They
Uh,
further, they went steps further to uh, enforce vagrancy laws and restrict ownership of certain types of property, basically limiting the opportunities given to the newly freed. These persisted until such time as the Jim Crow laws were enacted, at which point the first police forces were organized, and they initially were basically run, operated, and funded by the Ku Klux Klan.
Wow. Wow.
So they were basically tied into all levels of government. You couldn't get elected without a Ku Klux Klan endorsement in this country up until the 1940s.
Wow.
So any policing done was still done with the ideology that we were not equal by any stretch of anyone's imagination.
Man.
The first, what we would consider modern day police force, was formed in Boston in approximately the 1920s. And even at that point, there were still high levels of political corruption, which inhibited the growth of the Black community.
Mm. Mm.
And we all know that in the South, they were basically still arms. They basically still acted as arms of white supremacist groups up until the time, hell, to this day.
Hmm.
To this day, in some locations, they are still operated as arms of white supremacy groups.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I live in the South, and I've heard stories, and then there's documentaries that still point to this day the kind of systemic injustice when it comes to policing. And like especially like I know it's one thing that just pops in mind is Dothan, Alabama. And Dothan is like a little small town, but it's like has had like uh, rich history of police and justice, criminal justice, and when it comes to minority communities and communities of poor communities. So yeah, and it's like you saying what you just said. It's like sure I knew this stuff, but just hearing it again, and then just hearing like you having to have a Ku Klux Klan endorsement to even be an elected official, or just the foundation of which policing was built upon, right?
Yeah, well, you think about who the biggest lobbying groups in Washington have been for the past 100, 200 years, the NRA. And where did the NRA stem from?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that was the Southerners, right? And guns rights and keeping our rights as guns and being able to hunt, right?
Yeah, but it, the right to hunt that's not impeded by the gun laws that we need to enact. Because let's face it, you don't need an AR-15 to shoot a deer.
Nah. It's for recreational purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. But them country boys, I'm not gonna lie, Pop. Them country boys be having that weight. They had that weight. You come to the country, you know, um, having your gun, having your arms is very people are prideful about it. So you may have them out there with an AR with a big old 381. Like what I'm saying, like
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, 381. You can justify that. That's still not something that's going to create mass hysteria.
nah,
You have to be very, very good in order to kill more than a couple of people in a minute
yeah,
with a 381.
yeah.
Okay. But you basically don't need much skill at all to kill a bunch of people in a minute with an AR-15.
Nah, and and that's why like just a lot of life in this country has been dictated by Southern culture, and like the impact of, like we're saying, like guns rights, gun control, and controlling, communities, people. These being at the forefront and foundation of policing in this country. So it's just like how that even comes up to, like, we talk about the history, right? From when police really came online in America was around the 1920s, like you said. Before that, it was the slave patrol, right? In few because the Fugitive Slave Act, all of these different. It was multiple Fugitive Slave Acts, so where it
Yes.
was, that became a profitable thing where they were the sheriffs,
Yeah.
they were making sure everybody papers was correct, making sure that was your patrolman before the patrolman.
Yeah.
We
They basically acted as the posse, duly deputized by the local sheriff,
Right.
and within a state or multiple states via the Runaway Slave Act, they had powers to apprehend and punish in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've seen it. We've seen the movies 12 Years a Slave. We've seen Harriet. We've seen even with it being kind of glamorized and kind of made a comedy, Django. We've seen that slave catcher, that patrolman, the posse that's deputized to keep a certain community down, certain people down. And it's not always just been black. It's definitely Native American fall into that at different times in different wars. Other minorities fall into that same policing, same bully mentality, being the bullied.
Yeah, but what's really deep is that even with the dramatization, they can't really touch the reality of the brutality that was impacted upon the black community, because it wouldn't they couldn't even rate they couldn't even put it in the rating system, some of the acts that were perpetrated against us.
And I'm glad you went there, because that's at the root of what we're talking about. Is like, so we talked about the history of police and how police came on, but now what we're here to talk about is police brutality. And it starts with that trauma, that brutality, like you said. Like we look at, like you said, the glamorization, but no one knows, like, to the extent, unless you can get real footage or real testimony about it, like what these people. Because even in 12 Years a Slave, let's just take that example as a movie. That man was robbed of his freedom, right, by
Yeah,
slave catchers, and then put, you know that's a whole, the we always talk about the physical, but the mental trauma that came along with that, with you seeing yourself as an upstanding individual. But at any given notice, people who are deputized, people who are feeling like they are power, have the authority over you, can wield that authority at any given moment.
absolutely. And like I said, it pales the movies compare in comparison to some of the heinous brutality that was impacted the mental health of the black community. Imagine, if you can, for a moment, seeing someone let alone it be someone you love. Let's take it to the level of someone you love, a family member, okay, being hung, burned, shot, tied to the back of a car, and dragged through the neighborhood so everybody can see. That happened. That's documented. Those are documented facts from the Tulsa riots, from the Tulsa uh,
Yeah, right.
Genocide. You might as well
Massacre.
call it genocide
Right.
because
A
it was
massacre.
beyond massacre. It was
Yeah.
genocide.
Yeah, it was about 3,000 people that actually got affected by that.
And then the transgenerational impact of those who lived through it having to pass that information on in some way, shape, or form, even if not intentionally, to others.
And that just reminds me of what happened in I think that was Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. What you know, I think it's Williamsport. Hold on, I want to be correct when I say it. Yeah. Nah, that wasn't it. But it brings me to I just recently came across a it was basically like when reconstruction happened, like you were talking about the history of it. And you had a switch of political power in Virginia. And one of the cities, it slips my mind right now, and I apologize. I have that for you guys, but it's in Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, or Maryland. Uh, no, it wasn't that. Wasn't that? Had to be VA. Yeah, so it was a massacre in VA, like just like what you're talking about, you know. And it was because of the shift of power, because basically what had happened is African Americans post slavery had, at that time just got right into um being involved politically, changing the structure of the community that they lived in. So you had like judges, councilmen, representatives, all these people have basically shifted the power of the local community through the elections. So with the white men there at that time, and like you said, at this time, you have people who are deputized, right? People who are feeling as though they have authority over you, being able to wield their power. The guns, right? They came in and they basically, probably wasn't as many people as Tulsa, but I'm gonna have that for this next episode, and I'm gonna put that out there. But specifically, they basically murdered and did a coup d'etat. Basically came in and murdered, robbed, beat, burned all these people's homes as a domestic terrorism, right? As a way to take back power politically in this community. So this is at the forefront of policing and politics, right? And the justice system. So this is like you're saying, this people who lived through that time then had children, and their children had to then live through the aftermath and have children. So then it started to shape our minds, shape the way we interact with the police, because we're not even talking about Jim Crow. We're talking prior to Jim Crow.
Yes.
We talking about post slavery, up until like the 1920s. And then we get into the 20s and we got police. And we know and understand there's been numerous stories of from that time of policing injustice, whether it may be the Emmett Till story, whether it may be um, 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 Bloody Sunday. You know, these were cops beating on people, marching for freedom. These were, like you said, These were people who had been deputized by the KKK. You know, they may
Basically,
have been
yes.
police, but they have been deputized. They have been given the authority to act upon and fulfill the wishes of what we would say white supremacy or racism.
And in a lot of cases, they were actual members.
And that's the truth. That's the honest to God truth. That it would be because we see it, it's there within police of that time, you know, where they may have now been on their deathbed and come out and tell the honest truth about what happened then and how, this is, what was I was told to do and how I was told to do it. We even got that with the Martin Luther King assassination, right? Like it's in the law. I mean, excuse me, it's in the books that they were taking the police, the Memphis Police Department, the FBI, United States government as a whole was taken to court by the Martin Luther King family for $1 in a civil suit, and they were found guilty in the court of law for the assassination. Again, and this is all during Jim Crow, civil rights, and the impact of that, and then the people who lived through that and having to go through that and what that did, right? How we envision the police, right? We haven't even gotten to when we started to become included in everything.
Absolutely. And we became included. But when when exactly do you feel as though we became included? That's a that's a question that's up for debate.
So what I mean by that is because we talking about the history and we talk about the impact. So we talk about the then and now. So it wasn't like so now it's police don't look the same, right? So back then in the South, especially, if you got pulled over, you knew it was a white cop.
Yeah,
This was if you was in certain towns, certain places, you knew the majority of the force was white. But now it's cop and policing is different, which makes the dynamic of seeing the police different. Because while policing at the root is what we're talking about, and the trauma associated with police brutality from the formation of police, right, up into it from its conception to now. And now we have people of all races that are cops. And it's depending on your city, depending on the amount of different races you'll see within the force.
okay, I can accept that, but I say that until such time as the threat of being videoed came about, the color of the cop wasn't always an indication of who pulled you over.
But that's what
And,
I'm saying. That's
and
that,
no,
that
no,
that's
I
why
don't think you understand where I'm coming from. What I'm saying is it may have been a black cop in that car that pulled you over. Okay. But prior to the time that being videotaped became a possibility, that black cop may have been just as blue as the white cop that could have pulled you over.
but and that we are saying the same thing. That's why I'm saying like now while we talking about that, that's why we have to bring that up. Is that because people will say, they'll hear the podcast and they'll be like, y'all talking about white supremacy. All cops ain't white, but we have to understand that's why they transition. Because I live in Memphis, right? So I know that like you said, even with the ability of videotape, I'm gonna take it even a step further. It doesn't even matter if they get video. The ideology, like you saying, is already through and through. I myself, talking specifically about myself, I've lived in multiple places, and I've been in contact with the law. Never been arrested, never been to jail, but I've been in contact with the law. So specifically, why I'm saying what you're saying is, I know that it don't matter what color that cop is, but that's why we got to bring that up, because police brutality is not exclusive to white cops.
Not at all. And I
So
won't say it doesn't matter what color that cop is. I'll say that it may not matter
it may
because
not matter. And
because I have had experience, as I've talked to you earlier. I've had experience in my lifetime of actually knowing some police officers as human beings.
right.
Okay, um, I had one of my best friends' father was a police officer, and I spent a lot of time in their household. So I know that that does not necessarily pertain to every individual. Just like not every white cop is a racist or is likely to brutalize you.
No.
But at the same time, they may not be willing to step forward to stop you from being brutalized.
But that's why we have to preference everything you said in the beginning, the history of it. Because when people think about police brutality, we think about the now. We don't think about what came before. So people will be stuck on the fact, well, there's more black cops here, so there's black cops doing what. No, you're not understanding the philosophy of policing in America, right? So
Yeah,
when we start talking about policing, we gotta talk about like the ideology of policing and politics, right? And how police are basically the gatekeepers of politics. You see what I'm
definitely,
saying?
definitely. But you also have to go a step further and look at the mentality, the mental uh, perception of what makes someone want to be a cop. Okay, we already know that a very large majority of them are ex-military. We know that.
Yes. Yes.
So they've been indoctrinated into a society of violence, so to speak.
All right, and been trained in that mentality of taking orders.
Yeah, of exacting orders.
Right.
Okay, because you don't just take the orders; you have to carry them out
Right. Without conscious. Like
without conscience.
no second thought.
Yeah. So you have to first look at where does that mentality come from, and what does that say about the individual who puts on the uniform, badge, and gun. Then you have to look at the effects of walking around with that gun hours upon hours, day after day, where it becomes a second, where it becomes like a third appendage or a fifth appendage. Okay, it's no longer a tool; it's a part of you. I've seen a cop running down. I've seen a cop running down, and by the time he took his running somebody down, by the time he took his second step, he had already unsnapped the gun. He had already unsnapped the holster and had his hand on his gun while running. That's muscle memory.
Yeah, and not even just muscle memory. That's just like we start talking about our responses to situations, right? So he got muscle memory, but it also something clicked in his head because we start talking about mentality, right? Because everybody don't get those same responses, right? Every time police people differently. They police
Yeah,
different communities differently. So we have to have that mentality of like some of them are smart enough to withhold or withdraw, have restraint, or be able to de-escalate in certain communities. Whereas though, why is it, and it's a good question, good thing to talk about, why is it that this community, no matter the color, no matter the background, even if you came from this people and you got the badge, it's still the ideology that this person is to be treated as a dog, to be put down, right? Like a pit bull.
Because you see those communities as being worthless. Those communities are traditionally looked at as being worthless, which is one of the reasons why they police why communities are policed differently, is because you look at a map of a major city and you see areas where it's depressed, where there's a high concentration of drug use and sales, and that community, even though there are people in that community that don't fit into those lanes, that community is viewed through the eye or through the aspect of those that do fall into that category.
Yeah.
So,
Everybody is under that umbrella of poverty,
right.
despite your character. No, it's crazy because like these communities, we are policed differently, and it's based on perception, right? And that perception is what's so traumatizing to people.
But the perception goes back to the history.
You're right. And that's why we
Perception
talking
goes
about it.
back to the history. The perception goes back to how do you undo 200, 300, 400 years of viewing a particular type of person or particular ethnic group or particular race as being less than human, less than American.
I mean, you can't do it without telling the truth. That's first. You know, like because we haven't even gotten to as we was talking about different communities, talking about drug infested, like we don't talk about how we glorifies crack, glorifies cocaine and all of that, and how the police were pivotal in putting all of those things in our neighborhoods and keeping our things. So they put it in our neighborhood, and then when we started there selling it, right, and we started using it, then they started locking us up for it, right? And then so they was getting it on both ends. They getting money on because it was like you had the good cops, and that's the thing. Like you got good cops, you got bad cops, but they all in the same boat and they protect each other. So you
Well,
got your bad cops.
They only started locking us up for it when the Reagan administration really declared a war on drugs. Okay,
That was Tricky Dick. That was that was it. No, that wasn't Ron. That was Richard Nixon who did the war on drugs because it started with heroin and the dog whistle politics, right? That they started with that was when that war on drugs started and Reagan ramped up on it.
yeah,
Reagan,
Reagan ramped up on it to where it became something where they really started giving out unwarranted sentences to low level dealers and whatnot. They would lock you up and basically on a local level and basically give you a short sentence if you had enough to be considered a dealer. But during the Reagan era, that's when
mandatory minimum.
they started mandatory minimums, and they made the mandatory minimum for crack 10 times that for powdered cocaine.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like when we watch documentaries like The 13th, and we start talking about, like we said in this podcast, like police being the gatekeepers of politics. So we talk about Richard Nixon and the CIA and the FBI and all these people having their hands in on crack, right? And putting it in communities to be sold. And we know this to be true because it's in every movie about crack. And we got Freeway Ricky Ross who did his time, got out, and now he's every dope dealer's favorite person. You know what I'm saying? But they all in cahoots with the police. You know what I'm saying? Because we look at police as government too. FBI still police.
Yeah,
CIA,
you got to have enforcers.
Right.
You got to
And
have
that's what,
enforcers. It's just like any. It's just like the mob. You got to have an enforcer.
and
You
they the
know,
enforcers, like they, cause like you said, like man, like when it comes down to crack, the 90s, three strike rule, the crime bill, the 94 crime bill, like, black people be like, yeah, we were for that, but we not even knowing that we sipping on our own poison, the poison that they put in our community, and we following along with it instead of saying all of y'all wrong. We need the police ain't doing their jobs. They down in our community. See, we put a lot of faith in police. And then when they don't, and it's like as a poor community, we put a lot of faith in our politicians, put a lot of faith in a lot of people, and they don't show up for us, right? They don't show up to protect us, to give us the necessities that we need. But we're the reason why they are where they're at, because they always come to our neighborhood when they need votes, when they need districts. They can't do it without the poor folk. So, but it's like we constantly, get brutalized, because it ain't even just about, you know, uh racism when it comes to police brutality. Some of these cops are sexist. They do,
some of the cops are sadistic.
yes,
Let's go to where the mental where the mental aspect comes in that we were talking about earlier.
right,
Let's face the facts that you have sadists who have a badge and a gun.
right. Like the guy in Chicago who raped all those women, and he was a cop. You know what I'm saying? Like he had been on a tear. And it's like the police will protect each other. And see, the community of people who protect police, right? They don't want to talk about these things. But that's because they're insensitive to what we're talking about as a whole, emotional health, right? You talk about you're protected, but you're not protected if you don't feel like your life, right? If you feel like like we talking about certain communities, when the cop come around, they feel now everything is going to be under control. Other people, when the cops come around, they feel like I don't know what could happen. And especially goes back to what you said. We got people who done witnessed this stuff. We don't know the impact of seeing someone getting kidnapped by the cops, killed by the cops, raped by the cops, and your family member coming home. Now you feel powerless. We don't look at the impact. Like a person to throw a stone in the river and they see the waves and they think that stone, you know what I'm saying, I cause ripples. That's like trauma. Trauma's the same way. What happens to one person happens to a lot of people in that person's circle.
Yeah, because you have to look at how it's transmitted,
Right.
and you have to look at how much we do subconsciously, how much we transmit subconsciously.
Right.
It's like, you a rape victim subconsciously will, has the potential, if they have kids, especially if it's a woman and she has daughters, she has the potential to pass that victimology on to her daughter without making a conscious effort, without it being something that she does implicitly.
I mean, that's just like racism. It's like
Well, no,
you
racism is taught.
no, I'm
I don't
talking
agree
about
with you.
no, 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 no. Hear me out. Hear me out. What I'm saying is just like the effects of racist people
Okay.
on people, right? So, like
Okay,
you
the
said,
effects of racism.
right, right. So when you
Right.
say the victimology, you pass it so subconsciously, you're
Yeah.
passing that on, not even knowing that you pass it on implicitly. And that's the thing we talk about with police brutality, because it happens to so many people. It in our community, we don't even know that we're passing on that implicit, like without being implicit. So you pass on your fear, your
Yeah,
victimology.
the whole idea of black people needing to have the talk with their children.
Thank you.
The whole idea of that talk being a necessity
Yes.
is passing it on. It's perpetuating
The
the
trauma.
the trauma, but at the same time, it is indeed a necessity in today's society.
But that's why we have to have these conversations, because a lot of people, they like a lot of people of color, people in the poor communities don't know that this is at the root of what people are going through with the police. So you'll see people acting out, but they just think, "Are you poor? You just be quiet. Just sit down. Just what they call it, comply, comply, comply." But it's like, man, it's hard to comply if you know and been in situations where you've been victimized. You know, you've been traumatized. We have traumatic responses, and I'm not validating and making it okay, but I'm being sensitive to the fact, just like anybody who's been victimized, we should be sensitive to the fact of their victimization and the impact of that victimization, right? And that's why we have this movement of Me Too, and we need more of it. Like, it ain't just about one spec of understanding what victim. Everybody who's been through something carries emotional weight that we all should be aware of. And now we're becoming more aware of it. It's not just with rape victims. We also talking about childhood trauma. We also talking about military trauma. Like the different, like we're starting to understand the impact on the emotional level and how that impacts our nervous system. Because, like you said, this stuff that we are dealing with, the body keeps the score. That's why, like, we all think about a rape victim being like the poster child for trauma, because we know that we live in a rape culture, and we see how that the perpetuator, how most likely they were harmed. We see how it begets it, and that's we can apply that same lens to police brutality and the effects of racism. You see what I'm saying? And how you start to see it so much. It's that moral injury. You see it so, even if you didn't believe in it in the beginning, you see it so much it becomes your who you are, and you start to pass it on. You live through those fears, or if you are the perpetrator, you live out that identity. Like we said, that's the the fundamental thing of racism is everybody got to play their role, right?
So let me ask you this: are there any um, key indicators that you could give to people so that they could see ways in which they pass on trauma in a situation involving brutality?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, first indicator is like when we're reliving it and not processing it in a healthy way. So instead of standing up for ourselves, we're more or less creating identity, right? As a traumatic response. So, like we talked about last episode, we got like the fight, the flight, freeze, and fawn. People pleasing is fawn. Freeze, we know that's the isolator, disassociation, all that. We know what fight or flight. So when we start talking about the effects of police brutality, then we start to get how that shapes our personality and our behaviors. And one key indicator that is shaping your reality is how you see all the cops, feeling the need to protect yourself against all cops, right? Because all cops aren't bad, but there are a lot of bad cops. But when we don't speak the truth and we create an identity that we think will keep us safe, that's doing us harm, because it's nothing that we can do to stop a person who's already made up their mind on who they are. There's nothing you can do to stop that. So we have to realize, instead of fitting into the schema of brutality, and that's on everything, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's police brutality, whether it's family drama. We got to stop fitting into the scheme of the emotional harm and being more sensitive to the impact of it. See, a lot of people aren't sensitive. It's another key determinant. You don't become sensitive until it becomes a personal problem. Like it's my son, my daughter, my family member. Then we get the charge. But we have to first become self aware. What of our own feelings around police brutality? Am I sensitive to the plight of another? Or do I just blindly go with one side over the other? Because if I do that, that is not a healthy way of being empathetic or compassionate because you're only showing it to one side. So that's one way. Number two is just how we make decisions. Like you said, instead of always teaching our children to submit to the regime, we need to teach our children how to advocate for themselves and advocate for change. And that's on any side. Too many of us emotionally become damaged and become facilitators of the damage now, right? And it's because we subconsciously, like you said, we just respond. And instead of changing, we go with the fear and what's seemingly comfortable. If I speak up, I cause more issues. If I just bide my time, bow my head, I'll be okay. But that's not the case for everybody. If that was going to work, we would not still have so many people dying at the hands of police. Because everybody who dying at the hands of police ain't being rowdy, ain't being rebellious. You see what I'm saying? We got
Yeah,
cops literally making bad decisions. Like the cop in Florida with the mental health patient who shot the black man who was there to help, who had his hands up. And they were there for the mental health patient. You see what I'm saying?
yeah,
So those is like three major tips right there is just self-aware. What are your feelings around police brutality? What side are you choosing and why? Are you being sensitive? Are you being empathetic? Do you understand the history? Like we said today, outside of your feelings, do you understand the history of policing in this country? Where it started, the origins, how it transferred power from one community to another, how politics were involved, how they were the gatekeepers of this, the understanding. That's the self-awareness. That's the social awareness. And we have to do all of that, right? We have to take all of that information in with the idea to help us build better relations, right? To make better decisions and to be able to regulate ourselves in a healthy way so that we don't just have people of color or people in the poor communities that just respond, but understanding why they're even feeling the feelings that they feel. Whether it's a good cop or a bad cop, they understand what's at the root. And if you're not in that community understanding, you're not just observing, roguish behavior. You seeing trauma. You're seeing trauma lived out. And it's not an excuse, but it's like if you're a coach, you gotta take note and take heed of what's being put in front of you so you can then make the right moves. You feel what I'm saying?
yeah. Adjustments.
Right. Make the right adjustments. And I say all that to say, like we were talking earlier, we have to make the right adjustments because we cannot fight the good fight of changing the world if we're not healthy people. If it's like trying to tie a shoe with one hand. It's like trying to ride a bike with, one leg. It's going to be hard. It's not saying it can't be done because we know and understand, like I said today, there's people that can tie their shoe with one hand.
Yeah,
But
but
that's
a lot of
hard
that,
to swing.
a lot of that goes back to when you were talking about empathy. Okay, our empathy is short-lived.
Yeah.
It's very
That's the
short-lived.
first step.
It's like, it's like, it's like we don't remember the last time until the next time something bad happens. And then we start empathizing again. And in order to create unity, you must have empathy.
But and it's like what you just said though, Pop. That is a characteristic of PTSD, complex PTSD. The short-lived empathy, the moral injury. You go back to living the same. You've been so bombarded with this emotion. We don't even. It's like you have the emotion, but it's like it's so normalized. You're so desensitized to it. It doesn't change anything for you. We're not like as they say. If anybody who follows, something of a higher power, right? They have a higher power in their life. Love is at the basis of, finding a higher power. So it's like anybody that has that in their life should be appalled when people aren't leading with love. But like we saying, we live in a society where it's okay to be, roguish and go against love and destroy and kill, and we glamorize it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. We talked about that with the films. We glamorize, we dramatize, but at the same time, we still fail to tell the whole truth.
Right. And that's the impact. The impact. That's why we're here today, because the whole truth is the impact. And see, when you don't live in those communities or you don't go through that, you don't necessarily feel the impact. That's why it's okay for you to disassociate yourself or talk from a pedestal, as they say, you know? But we got to talk about that impact because we got generations of people. Like you said, it was so real. People didn't witness somebody hung before. And then seen that same person who hung that person in the cop car the next day.
Acting as if they did nothing.
Right.
That's one of the important factors is that how can you have any level of humanity and simply go on about life as if you committed no egregious act.
And that is the story of the century right there, because that is a sect of the dominant population of people. Not saying all, but a sect of the dominant population of people who can do harm and go back to life as if they didn't do it. Praise God, be in church. You see what I'm saying? And it's like that is not like that. That's like, how do you do that? Because at the end of the day, that's why. And for anybody who hears this podcast or on this, that and you hear that, oh, y'all wasn't there. Steady trauma. Please go look it up and educate yourself. That's what we're here for. We're not just talking about this from a historical point of view. We're talking about this from a health point of view. And anyone who knows trauma, even the leading authorities on trauma, will help you understand the impact of transgenerational or intergenerational trauma, right? Even the effects of things that happened hundreds of years ago. Look up Holocaust victims, Stockholm syndrome, all of these things associated with trauma. So that's why you can't say, oh, well, you wasn't there. No, that's not how trauma works. The body keeps the score and the body passes it on like it's like they pass on immunity. Like it passes on, a woman having birth. She giving him everything she's ever been through. And then he gets half of his father's DNA. And the DNA is shaped by the experiences your parents been through and you've been through. And we know these things now. That's why we got to be more empathetic to police brutality, because what we see is the expression of over 100 to 200 years of trauma. It's that deep.
Yeah, it is.
But I think we hit on it today. I think we got there. You know what I'm saying? I think, if they listen to this, they'll feel like, I need to learn more. If you don't know about police brutality and history of it, and not just look at it from a one-sided point of view, And like we said, start to advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves, or those who don't have the strength. Right? We may have the strength, but we have to fight. Can't just align ourselves with an ideology when everybody who follows that ideology is not even a good person. You talking about good people. Let's just hold people accountable to be good people. Not, like you said, sadistic, you know,
Yeah.
allowing cops to just do crazy stuff. And we know that's not good hearted. It's not sending out good waves. And it's happening in our community. And then with, like you said, with video, we seeing it more and more, which traumatizes us even more and more.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I feel like the reaction to um, the conviction in the George Floyd case has been over publicized and over interpreted as being a major change. It was simply, in my estimation, it was simply something that was too blatant to be ignored.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because had they had video of Breonna Taylor, could she have been ignored?
Not like the way they not like they doing it now. Not like it's they word versus her word. Because with Derek Chauvin, it wasn't no word. Your hand was in the cookie jar, and that's like the only way we can get real justice is when
And
we catch them with their hand in the cookie jar.
and all you need to do is look at his expression when he knew he was being filmed. There was absolutely no possible way that he could not have known that he was being filmed. And all you need to do is look at his expression to see the sadist in it.
Yeah. Oh, he said he was gonna live all this out. It wasn't nothing that those people on the side could cry out, could say. He was like, I'm going to live all of this out. And you got three other officers right there holding on to it. And you felt the need, But like you said, a lot of this be deputized is undercurrents of implicit bias. Like my boy Ahmad, forget his last name, but
Aubrey,
huh?
you talking about Aubrey?
Yeah. Like these folks really chased him down and stuff. They was the cops, like it was back in the day.
Yeah.
Like it was the early 1900s. Like we have a loose Negro that needs to be put down. He looks like he's causing ruckus. And like, see, we don't even understand like how film and media, like you said, the over publicization of these ideologies contribute to reality. You feel what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the first film in America, motion picture film of any reverence, like really loved in this country, was Birth of a Nation, which depicted black people as unruly, chicken eating, rapists, robbing, stealing, boo boo the fool, you know, just all scary, and that's what is at the underlying, you know, root of all of this. Because even in that movie, the KKK was glamorized.
Yeah, they were the white knights coming to save America.
And that's what I'm saying. When we start talking about where art imitate life, life imitate art. You see what I'm saying? That's where we at, where we start talking about the trauma and why people do the things they do.
Well,
You gotta.
we discussed that when we talked about perception,
Yeah.
because there are so many people in this country that don't want to take on the burden. Okay, and I say burden very sarcastically.
Yeah.
Okay, the burden of actually thinking.
Yeah.
They want to just usurp somebody else's idea or somebody else's ideology or somebody else's position and run with it.
Yeah.
Give me the ball, coach. I'll take it.
You're right. You're right. Man, I mean, like I said, I think we really hit on it. I think we really did. We might have to come back and do a part 2 because I don't think, as much as we outlined the correlation between then and now, I don't think we did as much justice the history as it opposed, like the Central Park Five, right? You
Yeah,
know, talking about the school to prison pipeline. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
And that, like, these are things that are like at the root of the distrust between the system, policing. You know what I'm saying? Like, we gotta, I think we gotta talk about this a little bit more. I would love to do another, and have some more people on that episode as well. Police brutality and the impact of it. And just talking, like you said, more history, more, anecdotal experience. Like, cause everybody got their own experience with the cops. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah. I mean, pretty much everybody has seen, heard, or experienced firsthand some negative aspect of of policing in America.
Yeah. Go ahead and say it,
And
police brutality, because it ain't always physical.
no,
You
it's
know what I'm
not.
saying? And sometimes it's verbal, very much so,
Yeah.
or mental. You know, 'Cause again, these people are supposed to be our public servants. They're not supposed to be our handlers.
Well, you can only be considered the public if you're considered a
A person.
citizen.
Yeah. And we were
And
three
in order to
three
be
fifths.
considered a citizen, you have to first be considered a person.
Yeah. And we,
And you
we
have
you
to
know, we know
have,
the history of that.
yeah, your humanity has to be accepted. It's like, I keep hearing about everybody's talking about they need to pass this voters' right act. And I'm saying that all they have to do is honor the Bill of Rights. Because the Bill of Rights doesn't say anything about your color. The Bill of Rights doesn't say anything about where you came from. The Bill of Rights says all men are created equal. So if you honor the Bill of Rights and accept us as being human, I think the only part they might need to add to that is all women too. They might need to
Yes.
say all men and women are created
Yeah.
equal.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if they honor the Bill of Rights, then all of that other stuff is unnecessary. It should not necessitate an act when the original bill gives us the rights that the act would give.
And like you said, we're constantly fighting for the rights that were granted to white people at the conception of this country. And it's like they don't even see that. They don't
Yeah,
even see that, like, these rights were afforded for the white man, especially because, like you said, that doesn't include women. So women have had their own fight, especially with the fact of being able to work and vote and all of that in this country. So everybody's had a fight, but the who's always been at the top is, like, the white man. And if everyone was afforded the rights of white men that founded this country, right? Then they, like you said, there would be no problem. If we all had the right to bear arms, freedom of speech, to be who we're going to be, we wouldn't have to have a Crown Act saying that women can wear their hair how it grows. Like, society wouldn't have to put an act through legislation. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, and we have to realize that an act is only for a limited amount of time.
Facts.
That, that's
Facts.
that's not that
It's
doesn't
not an
become part of the
amendment.
Constitution.
Right. It's not
You
an
know?
amendment.
Yeah,
Man,
but
like,
like you said, we might need to come back and discuss this some more, especially with all of the murmurs going around about the states. Certain states are trying to outlaw videotaping the police.
mm,
You know, so we might need to see how that flies or doesn't fly, and come back and have another discussion and determine how you're going to eliminate my Second Amendment right so that you can continue to have police brutality.
facts. Facts. Yeah. And like you said, all we're doing is painting the picture so people can have a better understanding of what's going on, so that it's not, we don't want people to look at this from an emotional standpoint. We want us to look at it from a logical standpoint. Even folks that are oppressed, Like, us coming from the community we come from. We still want to look at it from a logical standpoint to be able to understand, like, what are we dealing with? It's, like you say, it's chess, not checkers. Okay.
Definitely.
So, we always got to make our next move our better move. And, with that said, I appreciate you, Pop, for being
Hey,
on here, sharing this time, because it's definitely, it definitely put me in the space of, I've grown. I know that I've grown because I know I've been an angry young man and seen myself looking at the cops, like, and then just even having this conversation with you, seeing how I look at things a little different now, and I fight for, I fight in a different way now. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
And even hearing what you said about the past, it's just like more information to galvanize me. You know what I'm saying? To fight in the way that I'm fighting now.
it's always a pleasure.
Yeah. So we're gonna wrap. Get you on here again. You might be a reoccurring, guest as you are. But we appreciate you. Got any final words for him before you get out of here?
Just use your mind, don't lose your mind, and stay safe.
That's right. And that's coming from the man himself, Thomas Prey, my father. We appreciate you guys for sticking in here with us. Great conversation, education through conversation. Soul of Us podcast, your favorite mental health coach, and we promote emotional literacy, trauma awareness, social emotional learning. 5 core principles: self awareness, social awareness, positive decision making, self regulation, and relationship building. So tap in with us. If you need any coaching, DM me. If you would like me to come speak, if you would like anything, as far as our services, reach out. We're here. We're always committed to bettering our community. So if you hear this and you know somebody who could benefit from the information, pass it along. Like, share, and subscribe. Soul of Us on Instagram, Solar Unified Stance on Instagram, Unified Stance Family Services on Facebook. We also got YouTube page, Soul of Us Podcast, and we streaming on all the podcast platforms: Spotify, Google Podcasts, um, uh, what was it, Cast, Apple, all of them. So check us out. If you're watching live, just look at the banner at the bottom. And we signing out on another Good Friday. We love y'all. Appreciate y'all. We're gonna continue to give you this information, this love, because we're trying to impact our lives, other people's lives, in a way where we can heal on this journey to emotional wellness. And everything impacts us. So, like my dad said, use your mind, don't lose your mind. And we out of here.